Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey deep into the frozen heart and forgotten corners of British Columbia, through isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing and terrifying horror stories ever recorded. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real, documented encounters from ordinary people who never expected to face true evil. From abandoned logging roads to forests that watch you back. From hidden basements to disappearances that defy explanation. Tonight, you will hear horrors that should never exist. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of British Columbia, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Miller, and this happened when I was 26 years old, working night shifts as a courier in northern British Columbia. I took the job because I liked being alone. Long drives, empty highways, and forests stretching forever felt peaceful to me, until Cedar Road ruined that illusion. Cedar Road wasn't on any official map. It was a narrow logging route locals used as a shortcut, cutting nearly 40 minutes off my delivery route. Everyone warned me not to take it after dark. They said radios stopped working there, that animals refused to cross it, that people felt watched. I laughed it off. I needed the money, and shortcuts meant more runs per night. The first time I drove Cedar Road, the trees pressed in so tightly that my headlights barely reached 10 feet ahead. The forest felt intentional, like it was leaning closer with every mile. Then my radio cut to static, and beneath the noise, I heard something else. Whispering, not from the speakers, from the woods. At first, I told myself it was wind. Trees make strange sounds at night, especially cedars. But this wasn't random. The whispers rose and fell together, like dozens of voices breathing the same words. I rolled down my window just an inch, heart pounding, trying to prove I was imagining it. The sound stopped instantly. That silence was worse. No insects, no wind. Even the engine felt too loud, like it didn't belong there. When I rolled the window back up, the whispers returned, closer now, clearer. They weren't saying words I recognized, but the tone felt urgent, pleading, almost angry. Then my headlights caught something on the road. A man stood ahead of me, barefoot, clothes soaked as if he'd walked out of a river. His face was hidden by shadow, but his head was tilted unnaturally to one side. I slowed to a crawl, unsure whether to help or turn around. As I got closer, every whisper in the forest spoke at once, and they all said my name. I slammed the brakes so hard the van skidded sideways on the gravel. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I stared at the man standing inches from my hood. The whispers were deafening now, pouring through the windows, crawling into my ears like insects. I couldn't understand the words, but the emotion was unmistakable. Desperation mixed with rage. I rolled the window down halfway and shouted, asking if he needed help. The man didn't respond. Slowly, painfully slowly, he lifted his head. That's when I realized his neck wasn't broken. It was twisted, as if something had turned it too far and never put it back. His eyes reflected my headlights, glowing pale and unfocused, like a dead animal's. His mouth opened, stretching wider than it should, and the whispers stopped all at once. He spoke in a voice that didn't match his body. "Don't stop here," he said. Then he smiled and stepped directly into the trees without making a sound. I sat frozen for what felt like minutes, my foot hovering over the accelerator. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around. But Cedar Road was too narrow, and backing up in the dark felt worse than moving forward. The forest was silent again, watching, waiting. I drove on. Less than a mile later, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Tire tracks, fresh ones, leading off the road into the trees. Dozens of them, layered on top of each other as if vehicles had repeatedly swerved into the forest at the same spot. There were footprints too, bare feet, some small, some impossibly long. My GPS suddenly flickered back to life, recalculating over and over, unable to decide where I was. The road ahead looked wrong now, longer than before, stretching endlessly, repeating the same bend again and again. Then the whispers returned, softer this time, almost comforting. "Pull over," they murmured. "Rest. Join us." That's when I realized Cedar Road wasn't a shortcut. It was a trap. I tried to ignore the voices, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. Every time I rounded a bend, I expected to see the end of Cedar Road, but it never came. The same broken fence post appeared 3 times, each time more splintered than before, like the road itself was decaying the longer I stayed on it. The forest began to change. The trees leaned inward, their branches weaving together above me, blocking out the stars. Shadows moved where there should have been none, slipping between trunks just beyond my headlights. I told myself not to look directly at them. Something deep inside me knew that if I acknowledged them, they'd acknowledge me back. Then I heard scratching, slow and deliberate, coming from the back of the van. I pulled over despite every warning in my head. The engine stalled the moment I stopped. In the sudden darkness, the scratching grew louder, joined by soft breathing. Whatever was behind me wasn't trying to break in. It was waiting for permission. I forced myself to step out of the van, flashlight shaking in my hand. The air felt thick, like breathing through wet cloth. I circled toward the back, each step echoing too loudly against the gravel. The scratching stopped as soon as I reached the doors. I swung them open. The cargo area was empty. No damage, no marks. Just my packages stacked neatly, exactly as I'd left them. Relief washed over me, until I noticed something new taped to one of the boxes. A delivery label, my name printed in bold letters, and beneath it, the destination, Cedar Road. The whispers erupted again, no longer gentle. They poured out of the forest, from the ground beneath my feet, from inside my own head. I stumbled backward, tripping over something soft. When I looked down, my stomach twisted. It was a boot, still warm. That's when the trees behind me began to move, not swaying, but stepping forward. And I understood that Cedar Road didn't just want travelers. It wanted residents. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. Just ran toward the driver's seat as the whispers rose into screams. The trees advanced in slow, deliberate steps, roots tearing free from the earth with wet, cracking sounds. I slammed the door shut and turned the key again and again, praying for the engine to catch. The headlights flickered to life just as hands appeared on the windshield. Not human hands. Too many fingers, too long. Skin stretched thin and pale like bark peeled from a tree. Faces pressed against the glass, emerging from the darkness, their mouths moving in perfect sync. They weren't threatening me anymore. They were begging. "Stay," they whispered. "Drive for us." The engine roared back to life, and I hit the gas, the van lurching forward as shapes fell away into the trees. In the rearview mirror, I saw the barefoot man standing in the road again, smiling wider than before. This time, he waved, like he knew I'd be back. I don't remember how long I drove after that. Time felt broken, stretched thin like the road itself. Eventually, the trees loosened their grip, and Cedar Road spat me out onto a paved highway just as dawn crept into the sky. My radio crackled back to life, playing a cheerful morning song that felt obscene after what I'd survived. I reported the incident to my supervisor. He went quiet when I mentioned Cedar Road. Then he told me something I still hear in my nightmares. That road was closed 15 years ago after a logging crew vanished. Their trucks were found abandoned, engines running, doors open. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just whispers recorded faintly on a dash cam no one could explain. I quit that day, moved south, swore never to drive at night again. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear my name whispered from nowhere. And last week, a package arrived at my door. No return address, just a label. Destination, Cedar Road. I tried to convince myself the package was a sick coincidence. Anyone could have sent it. Someone from work. A prank. But I couldn't bring myself to open it. I left it outside for hours, watching it through the window like it might move on its own. That night, the whispers returned. Soft at first, slipping through the cracks of my apartment, seeping into my thoughts. They sounded closer than before, more familiar. When I finally opened the door to get rid of the box, I found muddy footprints leading from the sidewalk straight to my threshold. Bare feet, too many toes. I opened the package despite every instinct screaming not to. Inside was a set of car keys. My car keys. The spare set I'd lost years ago. Tied to them was a strip of bark, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly when I touched them. The whispers became clear then. "Your shift isn't over," they said. "You still owe us miles. I don't live there anymore. I move every few months, never staying long enough for the road to find me again. I sold my car, threw the keys into a river miles away. But distance doesn't matter to something like Cedar Road. Last winter, I saw it on a map for the first time. Not a digital one. A paper road atlas at a gas station. There it was, printed faintly, like it didn't want to be noticed. Cedar Road, closer to my new town than it should have been. Sometimes I wake up with dirt under my fingernails and pine needles in my bed. Sometimes my shoes are wet, like I've been walking all night. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see headlights cutting through fog and feel a steering wheel under my hands. If you ever hear whispers calling your name from the trees in British Columbia, don't answer. Don't slow down. Because Cedar Road doesn't need directions anymore. It already knows where you live. My name is Laura Kensington, and this happened during the winter I rented an old river house outside of Hope, British Columbia. I was 31, freshly divorced, and desperate for quiet. The house was cheap, isolated, and sat directly on stilts above the Fraser River. The landlord told me it flooded sometimes, but I didn't care. I wanted distance from people more than comfort. The first night I moved in, I noticed the smell. Not rot. Something damp and metallic, like wet pennies and cold stone. I assumed it came from the river below. The water moved fast and loud, constantly rushing beneath the floorboards like it was alive. Sleep was impossible. Around 2 a.m., the house began to creak, not settling noises, but rhythmic ones. Slow, intentional, as if something beneath the house was shifting its weight. Then I heard knocking. Not at the door, not on the walls, from directly under the floor. 3 slow taps, a pause, then 3 more. Like something was learning how to ask to be let in. I didn't investigate that night. I stayed in bed, clutching my phone, telling myself rivers carry debris. Logs hit pylons, animals crawl where they shouldn't. That explanation worked until the next morning. I went outside to inspect the underside of the house. The stilts were intact, no damage, no debris. But carved into one of the wooden supports were markings, long vertical grooves, deep and uneven, like they'd been dragged by fingernails far too strong to belong to any animal I knew. I called the landlord. He went silent when I described the sounds. Then he told me something he hadn't mentioned before. The previous tenant had left suddenly, middle of the night, left everything behind, clothes, wallet, even her dog. The river police dragged the water for weeks, but never found her body. That night, the knocking returned. Louder this time, closer. And beneath the sound of rushing water, I heard something else. Breathing, slow, wet, patient. Whatever lived under the house wasn't trapped by the river. It was waiting. By the third night, I stopped pretending the sounds were normal. The knocking had developed a pattern, always 3 taps, always followed by a long pause, as if whatever was beneath the house was listening for my reaction. I started leaving lights on, hoping it would keep whatever it was at bay. It didn't. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the floorboards beneath my bedroom flexed downward, just slightly, like weight being placed beneath them. Dust shook loose from the ceiling. I held my breath, frozen, as the house creaked in protest. Then a voice drifted up through the wood. It was faint and distorted, warped by water and distance, but unmistakably human. A woman's voice, calm, familiar. "Laura," it said softly. I sat upright so fast I nearly screamed. No one here knew my name. I hadn't introduced myself to a single neighbor. The voice repeated it again, closer now, dragging the syllables like it was tasting them. I grabbed my phone and recorded. When I played it back, the audio was empty. No knocking, no voice. Just the sound of the river laughing. The next day, I drove into town and visited the local library. I told myself I was just curious, but deep down, I needed answers. Old towns keep secrets in paper, not people. Microfilm records revealed the house's history. Built in the 1940s, 3 renovations, 2 disappearances. Both women, both renters. Both vanished during winter floods. Officially listed as drownings, though neither body was ever recovered. One article mentioned something I couldn't shake. A fisherman claimed he'd seen a figure beneath the house during low tide. Too tall, bending backward as it moved, skin pale as river foam. Authorities dismissed it as stress-induced hallucination. That night, the river was higher than I'd ever seen it. Water slammed against the stilts, shaking the house violently. I heard the knocking again, but this time it came from multiple supports at once. Then the breathing turned into words. "You left something," the voice gurgled. The floorboards began to warp upward now. Something wasn't under the house anymore. It was climbing. I tried to leave that night. I threw clothes into a bag, grabbed my keys, and rushed for the front door as the house groaned around me. The moment I stepped onto the porch, the river surged violently, water rising high enough to soak my boots. The current slammed debris against the stilts, and the entire structure shuddered like it was being tested. That's when I saw it. A shape clung to the underside of the house, its limbs wrapped unnaturally around the beams. Its skin was slick and pale, stretched too tightly over elongated bones. It didn't have eyes, just dark hollows that absorbed the porch light. As it shifted, water poured off its body like it had been waiting down there for years. It spoke again, its voice layered, overlapping itself. "You forgot the dog." My stomach dropped. The previous tenant's dog had never been found. The thing began pulling itself upward, hand over hand. like it had practiced this climb many times before. I slammed the door and backed into the kitchen, shaking so badly I could barely stand. The knocking returned, violent now, shaking plates loose from the shelves. Wood splintered as something heavy pressed against the floor from below. Then the smell hit me again, stronger than before. Wet metal, old blood diluted by river water. I realized it wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside the walls. The voice softened, almost gentle. "She stayed," it said. "So can you." I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bathroom, bracing the door with my body. Through the pipes, through the drains, I heard movement, scraping and slithering like something forcing itself through spaces too small to fit. The mirror began to fog, though the room was cold. Slowly, fingerprints appeared on the glass from the other side, pressing outward. The voice whispered directly behind my ear. "We don't drown here." I screamed as the bathtub drain began to widen. Something was coming up. The bathroom lights flickered, then died completely. In the darkness, the sound of water moving through the pipes grew frantic, like something forcing its way through every opening at once. I kicked the door open and ran, slipping on the wet floor as the house tilted slightly toward the river. I grabbed a flashlight from the hallway drawer and shined it down the staircase. Water was seeping up between the steps, rising against gravity, flowing inward instead of down. Something pale slid beneath the surface, too fast to focus on. I heard barking then, weak, desperate. A dog's bark, echoing from beneath the house, muffled as if underwater. It wasn't a memory. It was happening now. The voice spoke again, no longer pretending to be calm. She followed us. The floor beneath the stairs cracked open, and a hand emerged. Long, jointed the wrong way, webbed fingers grasping at the air. The house groaned in pain, as if it knew it was being hollowed out. I ran toward the front door, knowing it might already be too late. The door wouldn't open. Water pressed against it from the outside like a living wall. I slammed my shoulder into it again and again, screaming for help that no one could hear over the river. Behind me, the floor split wider, wood tearing apart as the thing pulled itself up. I finally turned to face it. It stood bent beneath the low ceiling, its body half human, half something shaped by water and time. Its skin hung in layers, marked with scars that looked like rope burns. In its arms, tangled in slick hair and river weeds, was the dog, still alive, eyes wide with terror, breathing shallow and fast. The creature looked at me with those empty hollows and tilted its head the way drowned bodies do when currents twist them. "You can leave," it said, "but something must stay." The house groaned again, deeper this time, as if agreeing. The river surged violently, and the lights burst back on all at once. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the dog barked, and the creature smiled. I don't remember deciding to move. I only remember standing outside in the freezing rain, the front door finally open behind me. The river had receded just enough to let me pass, like it was granting permission. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. No knocking, no breathing. The dog was gone. So was the creature. Inside, the floorboards had sealed themselves back together, leaving only water stains and the smell of rust. When I checked the bathroom, the drain was normal again, like it had never stretched at all. The police didn't believe me. They said the previous tenant probably fled during a flood and the dog washed away. They told me stress can make people imagine things. But that night, as I packed my car, I found something wet in my coat pocket. A dog collar. No name. Just scratch marks where a tag had been torn away. From beneath the house, I heard 3 slow taps. The river hadn't let me go. It had just followed me up. I live in the city now. Concrete, traffic, noise, anything to drown out the sound of moving water. It works most days. But whenever it rains heavily, the smell returns. Wet metal, cold stone. Last month, my downstairs neighbor complained about dripping sounds in his ceiling. Maintenance found nothing wrong with the pipes. 2 days later, he moved out without warning, left everything behind, even his dog. At night, I sometimes wake to the sound of water flowing through my apartment, though every tap is shut tight. When I stand barefoot on the floor, it feels colder than it should, damp, almost soft. I've learned something important since leaving that house. The thing beneath the river doesn't drown its victims. It replaces them. If you ever live near fast-moving water in British Columbia and hear knocking from below, don't answer. Don't investigate. Because rivers don't forget the people who listen. And they always collect what they're owed. My name is Daniel Fraser, and this happened 2 years ago on a late October night while I was driving north on Highway 97, just outside Kamloops, British Columbia. I was returning from a long work trip, exhausted, with nothing but the hum of the engine and the orange glow of my dashboard for company. The highway was empty. Just my headlights cutting through endless darkness and patches of fog drifting across the road. Around 1:30 a.m., I saw her. A young woman, standing on the shoulder, thumb out, drenched in rain that wasn't falling where I was. Her clothes were torn, mud caked to her boots, and her hair plastered to her face. I slowed, thinking she needed help. But something about her posture made my stomach tighten. She didn't flinch or acknowledge my car as I rolled to a stop. Her eyes were fixed on something behind me. And then she stepped toward my headlights, moving unnaturally fast for a woman so soaked and weak. I shouldn't have opened the door. I unlocked the door, hand trembling. She slid in silently, dripping rainwater across the passenger seat. Her eyes never left the rearview mirror. I tried to speak, but my voice was stuck, swallowed by the roar of the tires on wet asphalt. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said in a voice barely above a whisper, but it carried with unnatural clarity. I glanced at the mirror. Nothing. Just empty road behind me. No headlights. No other cars. I asked her name. She didn't answer. I asked where she was going. She shook her head slowly, almost sad, almost amused. Then she reached out and tapped my shoulder. Cold, ice cold. And I realized the fog in the mirror wasn't mist from the rain. It was forming shapes. Faint outlines of people standing at impossible angles, stretching, bending toward the road. The woman leaned closer. "I've been waiting for someone to pick me up," she said. "And now, you're next." I tried to tell myself she was just someone in trouble, a runaway or a lost traveler. But instinct screamed at me that this was wrong. Every mile I drove, the fog in the rearview mirror thickened. Shadows began to shift in impossible ways, stretching across the trees, crawling along the asphalt. She leaned closer, almost resting her forehead against the window of my side mirror. Her voice was soft, almost hypnotic. "Do you want to see them?" Before I could answer, I realized she wasn't looking at me. She was watching something behind me. My heart hammered, and I dared a glance into the mirror. The shapes had multiplied. Hundreds of figures, faceless, bending, twisting. They didn't move naturally. Their limbs stretched beyond human limits. Yet they were all reaching, crawling, pressing toward the highway as if waiting for my car to slow down. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. "Drive," she whispered. "Or join them." I floored the accelerator, the tires screaming against the wet asphalt. The woman didn't move or react. She simply sat there, staring ahead with those blank, haunted eyes. The fog outside swirled violently now, obscuring the road ahead while thick shapes moved alongside the car. Then her voice changed. It was layered, multiple tones at once, like dozens of voices speaking through her. "Look at them," she said. I glanced sideways at her just in time to see her reflection in the side mirror overlap with dozens of faces. Faces that weren't her own, twisting in anguish and anger. They stared into the car with hollow eyes. My stomach turned. A cold wind slammed the passenger side door, rattling the frame, though I hadn't touched it. Then the figures in the mirror began to step forward, stretching from the fog as if the highway had opened to let them out. I realized the woman was guiding them, and I was trapped in the middle of their hunt. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly, it felt like my hands might snap. The headlights barely cut through the thick fog, but the shadows were moving faster now, closing in. The woman's hand brushed against mine, cold as ice. But it wasn't threatening. It was guiding, almost pushing me to keep driving. The highway twisted unnaturally ahead. Curves I'd never seen before, trees bending toward the road as if trying to trap me. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The wind carried whispers, soft at first, then screaming in multiple voices, repeating my name over and over. She leaned closer, her wet hair clinging to her face. "Don't slow down," she said. "They don't like it when you hesitate." A shape darted across the road ahead. Not human. Too tall, limbs contorted. It disappeared before I could react, only to appear closer a moment later, standing silently, stretching impossibly across both lanes. I realized that if I slowed, I wouldn't leave the highway alive. The fog thickened even more. It was suffocating, pressing against the windshield, crawling along the edges of the car. The shadows outside multiplied, dozens of them now, stretching between trees and asphalt. I could hear scraping sounds alongside the tires, like claws dragging across concrete. Her voice, soft and melodic, whispered in my ear again. "Don't look at them directly. Only in the mirrors. They can't step through your reflection." I followed her instructions, terrified, stealing glances only in the rear-view mirror. The figures moved differently there, half real, half distorted, writhing and bending as if the fog had warped them. The woman's face remained calm, almost serene, though I could see faint bruising under her eyes, evidence of the pain she'd endured. She reached forward and pointed, directing me toward a faint break in the fog, a small, darkened pull-off that seemed impossibly distant. If I could reach it, maybe I could escape. But the shadows were gaining on me. Faster than my headlights, faster than I could drive, I could see the break in the fog ahead, faintly lit by the dim glow of a forgotten roadside sign. My pulse pounded in my ears as I floored the accelerator. The shadows outside rippled and stretched, moving faster than the car, weaving in and out of the fog. I dared not glance sideways. The woman reached over and touched the gear shift, almost guiding my movements. Her fingers were ice cold, and I could see veins darkening under her translucent skin. Then I heard it, a whispering chorus that wasn't human, layered in dozens of tones, all chanting my name. My heart skipped. A figure appeared directly in front of the car, impossibly tall, blocking the entire lane. My brakes screamed as I swerved, tires skidding over wet asphalt. She didn't panic. She simply whispered, "Drive through them." I obeyed, my hands white-knuckled, my teeth clenched. The headlights sliced through the shadows, and for the first time, I realized these things weren't entirely corporeal. They melted away where the light touched them, only to reappear in the darkness beyond. I reached the pull-off. The fog thinned slightly, revealing gravel and dead grass beneath my tires. I stopped, my chest heaving, but the woman didn't move. She tilted her head, pale hair plastered to her face, eyes fixed on the shadows still crawling in the fog behind us. "They'll follow you if you linger," she said softly. "They don't cross the light, but they learn. They remember." I didn't dare argue. I grabbed my bag, started the engine again, and drove toward the nearest town, lights cutting through the thinning mist. Behind me, I could see the shapes hesitate at the edge of the fog, unmoving but still present, stretching and bending in impossible ways. She stayed silent for the rest of the drive, her eyes distant, almost sorrowful. By the time I reached the first gas station, she had vanished from the passenger seat. Not a trace of rainwater, not a seat mark, nothing. I never saw her again. But the whispers didn't stop. I told myself it was over. She was gone. The shadows had vanished in the fog. I made it to Kamloops and checked into a motel, locking the door behind me and shutting out the night. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shapes in the rearview mirror, bending and stretching, reaching for me. The next day, I returned to the highway during daylight. Nothing unusual, just asphalt, trees, and the occasional sign. No fog, no shadows. I even stopped at the spot where I had seen her disappear. No trace of her, no wet footprints, nothing. But my car wasn't the same. On the passenger seat, faint scratches appeared along the leather, forming letters I couldn't read. When I touched them, the air grew ice cold, and I swore I heard a whisper in my ear. "You can't leave. You were chosen." I never drove that highway at night again. Years have passed, but I still feel her presence whenever I drive late at night on isolated roads. My friends tell me it's paranoia, that Highway 97 is just a long, foggy stretch with overactive imagination. Maybe they're right. Maybe not. Sometimes, when I glance at the rearview mirror while stopped at a red light, I think I see a pale, drenched figure sitting silently in the passenger seat, watching me. Her eyes are hollow, sad, and patient, waiting. Last month, I picked up a hitchhiker in the city for charity. She smiled, thanked me, and as I glanced into the rearview mirror, I froze. There was no face, just a foggy blur where her eyes should have been. I slammed on the brakes and the figure vanished into thin air. Some roads, I've learned, aren't meant to be driven at night. And some passengers never really leave. My name is Ethan Marshall, and this happened during a weekend trip with friends to Garibaldi Provincial Park in British Columbia. We rented an old cabin deep in the forest, isolated and surrounded by dense fog that rolled down from the mountains like a living thing. The cabin was rustic, charming in daylight. But once night fell, it felt wrong. The first evening was quiet, until the mist thickened. It pressed against the windows and door, muffling the forest sounds and swallowing the trail we'd hiked. Around 11 p.m., we heard scratching at the walls, light at first, almost playful. My friends laughed nervously, calling it squirrels or wind, but I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine. Then the whispers started, soft, almost human, drifting through the fog outside. My name. Ethan. It was distant at first, but growing closer with each repetition. Something was circling the cabin, and it wasn't waiting to be seen. We tried to laugh it off and stayed inside, but the scratching became deliberate. claws dragging along the wooden exterior, circling the cabin in a rhythm we couldn't follow. The whispers grew clearer. Not just my name. Others' names too. My friends, one by one. I looked out the window and saw movement in the fog. Tall figures, half-formed, almost translucent, shifting like smoke in the trees. I blinked, and they were gone. But the footprints were left behind, deep and uneven, pressed into the soft forest floor around the cabin. One friend, Mark, opened the door, thinking it was someone lost in the fog. A gust of icy wind slammed it shut again, carrying with it the sound of low, wet breathing, coming from all directions. The fog seemed to pulse, alive. My stomach churned as I realized the cabin wasn't in the forest. The forest was around the cabin, and we weren't guests. We were prey. By midnight, the cabin felt suffocating. Every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally, reaching toward us. The whispers were louder now, overlapping, as if dozens of voices were speaking at once. I tried to stay calm, convincing my friends that it was wind or echoes. But deep down, I knew the fog outside wasn't natural. Then came the tapping, small, deliberate knocks on the roof. At first, it was random. Then a pattern emerged. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more, as if the forest itself was counting. My heart thudded painfully against my chest. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it out the window. The mist swirled violently, revealing a shadow. A tall, hunched figure watching us from the edge of the trees. It didn't move like a human. Its limbs bent in impossible angles, its head tilted too far to the side, as if broken in ways nature never intended. It didn't leave. It just waited, watching, patient, knowing we couldn't escape. We barricaded the doors and windows, but the noises didn't stop. Scratches ran along the walls and roof, as if something were trying to enter from all sides. The fog pressed against the glass like a living hand, making the cabin shiver. Then came the footsteps inside. Slow, deliberate. The floor creaked in ways no human could walk. I held my breath, listening to the soft scraping, until it stopped right outside the bedroom door. A cold draft swept through the room, carrying whispers in a language I didn't know. I peeked through the crack in the door and saw it, a pale, shadowed face, impossibly long, pressed against the wood. The eyes weren't human, glowing faintly, and its mouth opened slowly, shaping words without sound. It was learning us, watching, understanding. The fog was alive, yes, but this creature controlled it, surrounding us with terror we couldn't see or fight. We weren't just trapped in the cabin, we were trapped in its world. I couldn't sit still. Every creak of the cabin, every whisper of wind through the cracks, felt like the creature moving inside with us. My friends were huddled in one corner, silent, shaking, too scared to speak. I tried to rationalize it, to remind myself it was just an old cabin. But the fog outside pulsed in rhythm with the knocks on the roof, as if counting down. Then the walls began to sweat, moisture forming from nowhere, dripping down onto the floor. Shapes formed in the mist outside, barely visible but unmistakably humanoid. They pressed against the windows, bending unnaturally, reaching through the glass with long, clawed fingers. I grabbed a fireplace poker and approached the window, shining the flashlight on the nearest figure. It recoiled, but not in fear. It seemed to grin, stretching its mouth too wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that glimmered in the dim light. I realized then that it wasn't just observing. It was hungry. Panic set in. We barricaded ourselves in the main room, stacking furniture against the door. But the scratches became pounding, hammering against the walls and ceiling. The mist outside thickened so much that the cabin looked like a floating island in a white void. Then came the whispers, louder than ever. They weren't saying our names now. They were speaking directly into our minds, repeating promises we couldn't understand, but that made our heads ache and hearts pound. I grabbed my phone and tried to call for help. No signal, no connection, only static and whispers layered beneath it, forming patterns that made my skin crawl. The fireplace exploded in a burst of wind and flame, though it hadn't been lit. Smoke filled the room, and shadows danced along the walls, stretching impossibly tall and bending the ceiling. The creature revealed itself fully for the first time. A silhouette, thin, elongated, and humanoid, emerging from the fog outside the window, staring at us with impossibly large, glowing eyes. We were trapped, and it knew it. The creature didn't move like a human. It slithered, bent, and stretched, defying everything natural. The fog outside thickened, curling into shapes that mirrored the creature. Dozens of twisted silhouettes pressing against the cabin walls. I could hear them whispering, a chorus of voices layered together, speaking in a language older than the forest. My friends were frozen in terror, eyes wide, staring at the walls as scratches appeared along the wooden panels, forming long, jagged lines that grew with each second. I grabbed the poker again, my hands shaking, but I knew it wouldn't stop the thing. It leaned against the cabin, and suddenly the floor beneath us trembled. The cabin groaned as if alive, threatening to collapse. Dust and splinters fell from the ceiling as the fog pressed harder against the windows. The creature's eyes, pale, glowing, and impossibly deep, locked onto mine through the nearest window. I understood then, this was no ordinary predator. It was patient, and it always waits. Suddenly, the main door rattled violently. The barricades I had built barely held against the force outside. A long, thin hand pressed against the wood, pulling, bending it with unnatural strength. The whispers grew deafening, voices overlapping in a horrifying cacophony that seemed to penetrate our very skulls. One of my friends, Lisa, screamed and tried to run toward the back door, but the fog poured in through the cracks, swirling around her legs and freezing her in place. She cried out, paralyzed by some unseen force, and I realized we were not just trapped in the cabin, we were trapped in its world. The creature pressed closer to the door, leaning its elongated, impossible frame against the wood. I could see its distorted features clearly now. Gaping mouth, jagged teeth, and eyes that reflected the fog like black mirrors. It whispered directly to me, "You cannot leave. The mist will take you, as it always does." And then the cabin shivered as if it were about to give way. The cabin trembled violently, splintering wood threatening to give way at any moment. The fog pressed in like a living tide, twisting into shapes that reached through the walls, brushing against our skin with icy fingers. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The creature's eyes glowed, following every movement, its jagged smile stretching impossibly wide. In a sudden moment of clarity, I remembered the old trail behind the cabin, the one marked as unsafe on the map. It was narrow, steep, and overgrown, but it might be our only escape. I grabbed my friends and whispered the plan. Every step toward the back door was a battle against the fog's force, like moving through thick syrup, the shadows writhing to slow us. We burst through the cabin, splinters cutting our hands and arms. Outside, the mist was suffocating, shapes twisting and stretching toward us. But the trail offered a sliver of hope. Somehow, we had survived. For now, we ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping our faces, fog wrapping around our legs and arms. The whispers followed, echoing through the trees, indistinguishable yet terrifyingly close. Occasionally, the elongated figures appeared ahead of us, vanishing before we could reach them, always blocking, always waiting. After what felt like hours, the forest began to thin, and the fog lifted slightly, revealing the main park road. Exhausted, bleeding, and shaking, we flagged down a passing vehicle. The driver stared at our ragged appearance and called the authorities. When we returned with them, the cabin had vanished. The trail was overgrown, indistinguishable from the rest of the forest, as though it had never existed. To this day, I cannot explain what we encountered. But I know one thing. The forest waits, and the mist remembers. We survived the cabin in Garibaldi Provincial Park, but the shadows, patient, twisted, and eternal, follow those who leave their domain. My name is Clara Benson, and this happened last summer when I was exploring abandoned sites on Vancouver Island. There's a long-forgotten hospital hidden deep in the woods, overgrown with vines and moss, its windows shattered, and its halls silent, except for the whispers of the past. I had heard the rumors: patients disappearing, strange shadows in empty wards, nurses and doctors seen but never remembered by anyone outside. Curiosity got the better of me. I entered through a side door, flashlight cutting through thick dust and decaying plaster. The smell hit me immediately: mold, rust, and something far fouler, like iron mixed with decay. The corridors were endless, lined with gurneys overturned, peeling walls, and doors hanging off their hinges. At first, I told myself it was just an empty building, haunted only by my imagination. Then I heard footsteps echoing behind me. Slow, methodical. They stopped whenever I turned, but resumed when I walked away. I wasn't alone, and I tried to call out, but my voice sounded strange in the empty hall, echoing back to me, distorted and hollow. Each step I took seemed to awaken the building, the creaking of floorboards responding to my movement like a living thing. Then I saw it. A nurse's uniform, folded neatly on a bed, though the bed itself was rusted and empty. My flashlight flickered, and I swore I saw the fabric shift, as if something invisible had just stepped into it. I backed away, my heart hammering. The footsteps grew louder, now echoing in the hallways around me, coming from impossible directions at once. Doors slammed shut somewhere deep in the building, and a low hum began, vibrating through the walls. I tried to leave, but the exit I had come through was gone. In its place was a solid wall, covered in mildew and scratches, like the building itself had swallowed the door. I realized then, the hospital didn't want visitors. It wanted prisoners. Panic set in as I stumbled deeper into the hospital. The hallways twisted unnaturally, turning back on themselves, like the building was rearranging itself. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the dim light, swirling with motes of dust and something darker, something almost alive. Then I heard whispers, not from a single direction, but everywhere at once. Dozens of voices, faint and frantic, overlapping, speaking words I couldn't understand. My flashlight caught movement, shadows darting behind broken doors, crawling along walls. I tried to focus, but the shapes shifted too quickly, always staying just out of reach. I entered what looked like the old operating theater. Rusted surgical tools littered the floor, and the smell of decay was overpowering. In the center, a gurney moved slightly on its own, as if an unseen presence had just shifted it. I realized the hospital wasn't abandoned. It was awake. And it was watching me. Suddenly, the lights flickered, briefly revealing figures in the corners of the room. Patients in tattered hospital gowns, faces pale and hollow, eyes wide and unblinking, standing perfectly still. I blinked, and they were gone. But the metallic scent of blood lingered, stronger than before. A low moan echoed through the corridors, followed by a rhythmic dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. My heart raced as I turned, catching movement at the edge of my flashlight beam. A shadow, thin and elongated, twisted around the walls, vanishing when I tried to look directly at it. I ran toward what I thought was an exit, but the hall stretched impossibly long. Doors that had been there moments ago disappeared, replaced by blank walls. The whispers became voices in my head, speaking directly to me. Stay. Forever. I stumbled into a room that looked like an old patient ward. Beds lined the walls, but each was occupied by something that shouldn't exist. And they were staring at me. I couldn't stop shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the hallway stretched endlessly, the exit I had entered now a distant memory. The patients, or whatever they were, shifted slightly when I passed, tilting their heads in unnatural ways, their hollow eyes following me, yet their bodies never fully moved. A sudden clatter made me spin around. Rusted wheelchairs rolled across the floor on their own, moving as if guided by invisible hands. The whispers escalated into a chorus, each voice overlapping the next, chanting words I couldn't comprehend. The metallic scent of blood intensified, filling my nostrils and making me gag. I found a stairwell leading downward. The air grew colder with every step, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick darkness. The low hum of the building's heartbeat, or mine, vibrated through the walls. At the bottom, I discovered a basement corridor lined with doors, each slightly ajar, revealing darkness deeper than anything above ground, and something moved within that darkness. I took a deep breath and forced myself forward. Each door I passed revealed horrors I could barely comprehend. Mangled figures frozen mid-motion, shadowed patients pressed against walls, whispering silently in the dark. The air seemed to pulse around me, heavy and alive, each breath tasting of decay and iron. Then I saw it. A figure in the farthest corner, barely illuminated by my flickering light. It was tall, thin, its limbs bent unnaturally, with glowing red eyes that fixed on me like a predator. I froze. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to make the walls close in. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The whispers intensified, now layering in my mind, repeating my name over and over. I realized the hospital wasn't just haunted, it was alive, feeding on fear, and I had become its newest prey. I could feel it following me, a presence so heavy that each step felt like wading through thick water. The whispers became screams, echoing through the hallways and inside my skull at the same time. Every door I passed seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like the hospital itself was alive. Suddenly, shadows shot across the walls, elongating and twisting, mimicking my movements with a grotesque precision. I stumbled into a small storage room, slamming the door behind me. The sound of dragging footsteps outside made me realize it didn't need to enter. It could manipulate the building itself. In the corner, a rusted gurney tilted unnaturally. On it, a shadowed figure slowly sat up, head lolling to one side, eyes hollow and glowing faintly red. It whispered something I could almost understand, words that promised torment and endless wandering through the hospital's halls. I had no choice. I ran, faster than I ever thought possible, deeper into the bowels of the building, toward an unknown exit that might not even exist. The basement corridor seemed endless, each turn bringing more distorted rooms filled with unearthly figures. Some crouched, some standing, all staring at me with hollow eyes that glimmered in the dim light. The air was thick with whispers, so loud they felt like physical pressure pushing against my chest. I came across an old elevator. Its doors were rusted, but I yanked them open and pressed the button for the main floor. The cables groaned, metal shrieking as it descended slowly, taking me deeper into darkness I couldn't see or understand. Suddenly, a hand, a thin, elongated, shadowy hand, slammed against the elevator wall inside with a force that rattled the entire shaft. The whispers intensified, chanting in an unintelligible language, filling my mind with pure panic. Somewhere above me, I could hear the faint clatter of wheelchair wheels racing through empty corridors, pursuing me relentlessly. I had no idea if the elevator would lead to safety or deeper horror. The elevator jolted violently, then descended into complete darkness. The whispers became unbearable, a deafening chorus that seemed to pierce directly into my mind. I could feel the building's heartbeat, pulsing through the metal walls, vibrating against my bones. Every instinct screamed to run, but the elevator cables groaned as if warning me that one wrong move would cost everything. When the doors finally opened, I stumbled into a massive, open hall, lit only by shafts of moonlight through broken windows. The floor was littered with debris, overturned gurneys, and the skeletal remains of old hospital equipment. And in the shadows, figures began to emerge. Patients, nurses, doctors, all frozen mid-action, their hollow eyes fixed on me with impossible clarity. I ran blindly through the hall, my footsteps echoing as the shadows remained perfectly still, watching, calculating. I realized the hospital didn't just want to scare me. It wanted to consume me. Every corner, every doorway, every darkened space was alive. And it was closing in. I finally saw a staircase leading upward, the only apparent way out. I sprinted, my legs burning, the whispers chasing me, now forming words I could understand. Stay. Stay with us. Forever. The figures didn't move, but I felt their presence pressing against me, guiding, herding me like prey. I burst through the final door and into the moonlit courtyard outside. For a brief moment, relief washed over me. The fog had thinned, and the hospital looked abandoned and empty from the outside. But as I turned, I saw them. Hundreds of shadowed figures staring at me through shattered windows, waiting. Their eyes glowed faintly red in the darkness, unblinking, patient, eternal. I ran to my car and sped away, never looking back. The hospital faded behind me, swallowed by trees and mist, as though it had never existed. I still see its shadows in my dreams. And I know, deep down, it is still waiting for the next visitor. My name is Lucas Reed, and this happened during a solo hiking trip in Strathcona Provincial Park on Vancouver Island. I had been planning this trip for months, eager to escape the city and immerse myself in the wilderness. The park is beautiful, remote, and unforgiving, an endless expanse of mountains, dense forests, and mist-shrouded lakes. I started early in the morning, confident and excited, unaware that by nightfall, I would be lost in more ways than one. By mid-afternoon, I reached a secluded trail that disappeared into thick fog. The further I went, the quieter the forest became. Birds vanished, leaves barely rustled underfoot, and an eerie stillness hung in the air. It was beautiful, but unnatural, too perfect, too silent. Then I noticed the trail markers had disappeared. No painted blazes, no signs, just dense trees and thick fog. A shiver ran down my spine, and I realized I had entered a part of the park I didn't recognize. Somewhere ancient and untouched, and I was completely alone. I tried to backtrack, but every tree looked the same. Every shadow stretched unnaturally in the dimming light. My footsteps echoed too loudly in the silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving just beyond my vision. I kept telling myself it was an animal, maybe a deer or a bear, but my instinct screamed otherwise. As the fog thickened, I began hearing soft, deliberate footsteps behind me. They matched my pace, stopping when I stopped, resuming when I moved. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just mist curling around gnarled tree trunks, the shadows shifting like living things. I called out, hoping someone, anyone, would answer. But my voice returned distorted, swallowed by the forest. Then I saw it. A figure, pale, tall, almost transparent, standing a few meters ahead on the trail. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me with hollow eyes that seemed to peer straight into my mind. For the first time, I felt real fear. I was no longer alone. I tried to move cautiously, hoping the figure would vanish or reveal itself as a trick of the fog. But it didn't. Every step I took, the figure mirrored me, remaining just ahead, yet never moving closer or farther. The forest seemed to close in around me, trees leaning unnaturally, their branches like grasping hands. I stumbled over a root and fell hard, scraping my hands and knees on the damp earth. When I looked up, the figure was gone, but the footprints it had left in the soft soil were unmistakable. Tall, human-like, yet impossibly elongated, stretching across the ground in uneven strides that didn't match any human gait. My heart pounded as the whispers began. Soft at first, almost like the wind, but then forming words in a language I didn't know. Speaking directly to me, repeating my name, urging me to follow. Against my better judgment, curiosity and terror drove me forward. I had no idea the forest would not let me leave. I followed the footprints, my mind screaming at me to turn back. But the whispers grew louder, almost beckoning. The fog thickened to a solid wall around me, cutting off all familiar paths. Trees twisted in impossible angles, roots forming strange patterns on the ground, as if the forest itself was alive, guiding me deeper. Then I saw movement in the mist, a shadow darting between the trees, always just at the corner of my vision. I spun around, but nothing was there. Yet the footsteps resumed behind me, faster now, circling me in a rhythm I couldn't predict. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I wasn't the first to walk this trail alone. Some presence had been here long before me, waiting, learning, patient. The whispers became urgent, almost pleading. Stay. Forever. Panic clawed at my chest as I broke into a run, the fog swallowing the trail behind me and twisting the forest into a maze that seemed to have no end. I stumbled through the fog, my legs burning and lungs heaving, the whispers now a deafening roar in my mind. Every tree seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. Branches bending like they were alive, reaching toward me. The trail I had been following dissolved into the mist, leaving me disoriented, unsure of which direction was even forward. Then I saw it again. The pale figure standing in the middle of the trail. Its form was taller than any human, limbs impossibly long, head cocked to the side unnaturally. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly red, piercing through the fog, and it made no sound. Yet I felt its awareness, its intelligence, tracking my every move. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The whispers now formed full sentences in my mind. You can't leave. The forest remembers. The forest takes. I understood then that the forest wasn't just hiding the figure, it was part of it. And I was already trapped. I ran blindly, crashing through undergrowth, my hands clawing at wet branches as the fog thickened around me like a living wall. The whispers became screams, overlapping, as if the entire forest had begun shouting, telling me I couldn't escape. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, figures with twisted limbs moving in impossible ways, vanishing when I turned my head. I stumbled into a clearing and froze. In the center stood a massive stone monument, overgrown with moss and roots, etched with symbols I couldn't recognize. The pale figure hovered near it, motionless, watching. I realized the monument wasn't just a marker. It was a boundary. I had crossed it unknowingly, entering a space the forest protected fiercely. The whispers swirled around me, urging me forward, guiding me toward the figure, toward the unknown. Fear clawed at my chest, but I knew that stopping meant losing myself entirely to the forest's grasp. Every instinct screamed to run, but the forest had other plans. The figure began moving toward me, gliding through the fog with an impossible grace. Its limbs bent in ways that no human could, yet it made no sound, leaving only the oppressive sense of its presence. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging, as I realized that running might not help. The forest itself seemed to bend to its will, the fog thickening and twisting around me, funneling me toward the clearing. I stumbled over roots, gasping, trying to find a way around the monument, but the figure blocked every path. I could feel its gaze drilling into my mind, pressing me to obey, to kneel, to surrender. Shadows coalesced behind it, faint humanoid shapes emerging from the mist, all silent, all watching. Then a low, guttural whisper rolled through the clearing. Forever. I stumbled back, almost falling, and the ground beneath me seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, syncing with the figure's rhythm. I realized that the forest and its guardian did not allow trespassers, and I had trespassed. Panic consumed me. I turned and ran, crashing through undergrowth, branches scratching my face and arms. The whispers escalated into a deafening chorus, all shouting in unison, reverberating inside my skull. Every tree seemed alive now, roots twisting and rising to block my path, branches reaching to snag and pull me back. The figure glided behind me, moving impossibly fast despite its thin, elongated limbs. Each time I risked a glance, its hollow eyes pierced through the fog, unblinking, patient, eternal. The clearing vanished as I sprinted, replaced by twisted corridors of trees, the forest bending unnaturally around me. Somewhere ahead, I thought I saw light, the hint of a trail, an opening to safety. But the fog shifted, and the figure appeared directly in front of me, blocking the way. I skidded to a halt, my mind racing. It whispered again, this time softly, almost tenderly. No one leaves, not alive. And the forest waited, patient and eternal. Desperation pushed me forward, my legs pumping as if my life depended on it, because it did. The fog thickened into a solid wall around me, obscuring every familiar landmark. The whispers transformed into screams, shouting in a language I couldn't understand, but felt deep in my bones. Every shadow flickered unnaturally, dancing and stretching, forming shapes that seemed almost human, yet grotesquely wrong. Ahead, I glimpsed a faint glimmer of light, a break in the fog, perhaps an escape. I sprinted toward it, the elongated figure gliding silently behind me, matching my every move. The whispers became taunting, saying my name in a tone that promised despair. Roots reached for me, branches clawed at my legs, yet I pressed on, narrowly avoiding each trap. I leapt toward the light, crashing through the final curtain of fog, and stumbled onto the main trail, a path I recognized. The forest's grip loosened slightly, but the echoes of whispers remained. following me, lingering in the shadows at the edge of my vision. It had not let me go entirely. I finally reached the trailhead, where faint signs of human presence, a worn signpost, tire tracks in mud, assured me I had returned to reality. I collapsed, gasping, my heart hammering, sweat and blood mixing with the dirt on my hands. Behind me, the forest seemed calm again, serene in the moonlight, but I could feel it watching, patient, eternal. I never spoke of what happened to anyone at first. Friends and rangers assumed I had gotten lost or imagined things in the fog. But I knew the truth. The forest had remembered me. The figure, the whispers, the impossible footprints. They had been real. I have never returned, but every time I hike near Strathcona, I feel its presence at the edge of the trees. It waits, always watching, always ready for the next hiker to wander too far into its domain. The forest does not forgive, and it never forgets. My name is Ethan Carver, and this happened the winter I volunteered to maintain the old lighthouse on the northern tip of Vancouver Island. The lighthouse had been automated for decades, but local authorities occasionally sent caretakers to ensure the structure remained intact. It was isolated, surrounded by jagged cliffs, roaring ocean waves, and wind that cut through clothing like knives. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the previous keepers. Some vanished without a trace. Others claimed the lighthouse itself whispered at night. The first night was uneventful. I explored the lighthouse, taking note of rusted railings, broken equipment, and the musty smell of salt and decay. But as midnight approached, the silence changed. Footsteps echoed across the spiraling metal staircase, slow and deliberate. The wind howled, yet the steps sounded as though someone, or something, walked above me, inside the lighthouse. I called out, expecting an answer. Nothing. Just the cold steel under my hands and the feeling that I was being observed, silently, patiently, with intent. By the second night, the strange occurrences intensified. Doors that I had locked earlier were found wide open. Shadows moved along walls, disappearing when I tried to confront them. The wind carried whispers, low and unintelligible, echoing as if from another time. I began noticing objects slightly displaced, the lantern on the railing, a logbook open to pages I hadn't read. One night, I climbed to the lantern room to check the light. As I reached the top, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the railing, a man, pale and thin, dressed in the tattered uniform of an old lighthouse keeper. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with hollow eyes. My flashlight flickered, and the figure disappeared, leaving only the sound of the waves crashing below. The isolation was starting to weigh on me. Sleep became impossible. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of metal a threat. I realized the lighthouse was not empty. It was haunted by its past and by something far darker than I had anticipated. The third night brought a storm, the kind that turns the ocean into a living, roaring beast. The lighthouse groaned under the wind, metal screeching, waves slamming against the cliffs like fists against stone. I huddled in the lantern room, trying to ignore the sensation of being watched. But the figure appeared again, not on the railing this time, but standing just behind me. I spun around, nothing. Just the shadows, shifting and stretching in the flickering light. The whispers returned, louder, forming words I could almost understand. Leave, or join us. I realized the lighthouse was not merely haunted. It was a prison for anyone who stayed too long. Objects moved without explanation. The logbook slid across the floor. Chairs tipped over, and the sound of footsteps circled me relentlessly. I tried to leave, but the stairs seemed longer than before. each step echoing impossibly, as if the building itself resisted my escape. The storm outside raged, but inside, something older and darker had awakened. I decided to confront the haunting directly. I spoke aloud, demanding the figure show itself. The wind howled in response, rattling windows and doors, and a cold hand brushed across my shoulder. I froze, my heart hammering, and the whispers became a deafening roar, voices overlapping, chanting in unrecognizable tongues. Suddenly, the logbook slammed open on the floor, pages flipping wildly. On one page, a name was written in red ink: Ethan Carver. My blood ran cold. The writing wasn't there before. The figure appeared in the center of the room this time, fully visible, dressed in the centuries-old uniform of the lighthouse keepers, eyes hollow, black, and endless. I realized the previous keepers hadn't disappeared by chance. They had been claimed by the lighthouse, absorbed into its very walls, their souls trapped to guard the beacon forever. And now it seemed the lighthouse wanted me to join them. Fear gripped me as the wind carried the whispers once more. Forever, you will remain. I tried to run, but the staircase spiraling down from the lantern room seemed endless, stretching farther than it should have. Each step reverberated as if the building itself was amplifying my fear, twisting reality. The wind outside had become a banshee's scream, but inside, the presence was heavier, suffocating. Shadows flickered along the walls, not just moving, but crawling, reaching toward me like the building had grown teeth. The figure glided ahead, just out of reach, its hollow gaze locked onto me. I could hear whispers in my mind, echoing my own thoughts, predicting my movements, forcing me to panic. Objects flew across the stairwell, a chair smashing against the wall with a metallic shriek. I stumbled down, scraping my hands on rusted railings, heart hammering, knowing the lighthouse didn't just want to scare me, it wanted to trap me. I glimpsed a faint light at the base of the stairs. Relief surged, but something in the shadows told me that reaching it would not guarantee freedom. At the bottom of the staircase, I found myself in a narrow corridor, walls lined with peeling paint and rusted pipes. The faint light ahead came from a small door that seemed ordinary, almost inviting. But the shadows of the lighthouse lingered, elongating unnaturally across the floor, twisting like living entities. The figure hovered just beyond the doorway, waiting. I could feel its presence like a weight pressing on my chest, a cold hand reaching into my soul. The whispers now formed a chorus, chanting my name, repeating promises of eternal imprisonment. I realized the lighthouse had claimed the previous keepers not through violence, but by binding their will to itself, absorbing them into its ancient, malevolent design. Terror surged as the figure reached toward me, and the corridor seemed to constrict, the walls bending inward. My survival depended on one choice: flee through the door and risk what lay beyond, or remain and become part of the lighthouse forever. I braced myself and stepped through the doorway, only to find myself in a room unlike any I had seen before. The walls were lined with old portraits of past lighthouse keepers, each face pale and twisted, eyes hollow and filled with silent screams. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of salt, decay, and something far older, an essence that pressed into my lungs, making each breath a struggle. The figure followed, gliding silently across the room, and as it moved, the portraits seemed to whisper, their voices blending into the choir of the lighthouse. I realized with horror that each keeper had become part of this place, their souls trapped within its walls, unable to escape. The floor beneath me vibrated faintly, syncing with a pulse that felt alive, like the lighthouse itself had a heartbeat. I felt the figure reach for me, its coldness creeping into my very bones. I had no weapon, no escape, only a single thought: survive or be consumed. Panic surged as I searched for an exit. But the room seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls bending in impossible ways. Shadows twisted along the floor and ceiling, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to reach for me. The whispers intensified, forming words that clawed at my sanity. Stay. Join us. Forever. I finally spotted a hatch in the corner, partially hidden behind an overturned chair. I lunged toward it, the figure gliding after me, its presence pressing down like an invisible weight. The portraits' faces seemed to scream as I crawled through the hatch, and the air grew colder with every movement. Behind me, I heard the figure glide over the floor, faster than any human could, relentless, patient. The lighthouse wasn't letting me leave easily. It wanted to add me to its collection of souls, its eternal guardians. Every instinct screamed for freedom. Yet I knew the struggle had only just begun. I crawled through the hatch, barely managing to pull myself into a narrow maintenance corridor. The air was damp, smelling of rust and salt, and the whispering had intensified into a relentless roar. The figure was right behind me, gliding silently, its hollow eyes fixed on me, unwavering, endless. Every step I took, the walls seemed to shift, the floor undulating beneath me, trying to throw me off balance. Ahead, I spotted a stairwell leading to the outside. Hope surged, but it felt unreal, as if the lighthouse was testing me, mocking my desperation. I scrambled up the steps, branches of the building seeming to reach out, grasping at my clothes and hair. The whispers now formed clear words. Join us. You belong forever. Finally, I burst out onto the cliffside, the wind tearing at me, waves crashing far below. The figure didn't follow, but I knew it was still there, watching, waiting for my return. The lighthouse had claimed enough souls for one lifetime, but it would not forgive me for trespassing. I stumbled down the cliffside trail, drenched, exhausted, adrenaline still thrumming through my body. The lighthouse loomed behind me, silent now, bathed in moonlight, seemingly harmless from the outside, but I knew better. The wind carried a faint whisper, almost playful, mocking, "We remember you." Once I reached the nearest ranger station the following morning, I told my story. They listened politely but dismissed it as imagination fueled by isolation and storm-induced delirium. But I know the truth. The lighthouse is alive, patient, eternal. It absorbs the minds and souls of those who linger too long, binding them as keepers for eternity. Even now, years later, I dream of the hollow eyes, the whispering walls, and the portrait's screaming faces. I have never returned, but I feel its presence whenever I pass the northern tip of Vancouver Island. Some places are not meant for humans, and some lighthouses are hungry. The forests, cliffs, and remote corners of British Columbia hide secrets far darker than anyone could imagine. From the vanished hikers of Strathcona to the haunted lighthouse on Vancouver Island, we've witnessed horrors that are real, disturbing, and utterly unforgettable. These stories are not myths or campfire tales. They are encounters from ordinary people thrust into extraordinary terror. Moments that defy reason and chill the soul. Every shadow, every whisper, and every forgotten path carries the echoes of those who came before, trapped or lost to places that do not forgive. And while the forests remain silent now, and the lighthouses appear still, the darkness waits, patient, eternal, watching. If tonight's tales have left you unsettled, remember, some places are alive, and some horrors are never far from the edge of reality. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.